Welcome, adventurers and fellow world builders. My name is Yadro, and this is Yadro Gaming. We're doing something a little bit different in this video in that I'm bringing on one of my players to have a little bit of a discussion with us about the Quiet Year, his character, our past experience in games, and just to chat a little bit about D&D and other tabletop role-playing games. Paul, welcome back to the campaign.
It's good to be back, man.
So, I think you have been in 4 campaigns prior, back when I used to live where you used to live, but now you live where I live. And this is our 5th campaign together, right?
I think so.
So this is campaign 3 in the new location, and I'm so glad you moved
hmm
up here so we could get you back into the fold.
Oh, I'm excited.
So this is something you haven't had to do in a while, and that's like jumping in to a group with new people that you haven't played with before, like an
Yes.
entirely new group where they have like a little bit of chemistry before
hmm
like you got here.
hmm
So like how did you feel about that? I know you got to meet them now, but like how has that been?
So it was a huge help that I knew you already. So the guy, quote unquote, in charge I know him. We're
Hmm.
friends. So that made it really easy. Like I had somebody I knew. But yeah, it was definitely less of nervous of like, oh, will they like me, but more of nervous, am I gonna like them? Like, are they going to bug the crap out of me? And so far, I love everybody. My goal now is not to bug the crap out of them.
Yeah, that's a good goal to have when you go to a new table.
Right, right. Yeah. So yeah, it's been great. Growing up as a military brat helps with that too, where I can get into a new group of people without too much trouble.
Yeah, and I would say that it's been pretty smooth so far. I mean, we're going to talk about the quiet year here in a second, but I thought you
hmm
did a really good job of like assimilating there and bouncing off ideas off some other people because
hmm
I think you came in with kind of like the firmest idea of what you kind of wanted your next character to be with
Yeah.
like some flexibility in the backstory. So we're gonna do Nine in a second, and we'll talk about him.
Sure.
But tell
Sure.
me about the Quiet Year itself. How did you feel about it? You'd never played it before, and some other people had. But what did you think of that experience?
I was pleasantly surprised isn't the right word. I thought it would work. You're using it and you said it like you liked it, but I really liked how it worked. Especially with this group and with you where um, everybody kind of had some neat ideas to throw in there and little things like you don't really get to pick what happens in your town. You define some initial stuff, which threw me off at first because I had in my head, speaking of stuff I had firmly, I had in my head kind of what I was thinking, and I had no problem throwing that out and be like, okay, cool, that's not how it's going to work, that's fine. And I love what happened. Tellerant being this mercenary city because they're a mining city, like that's wild. I would have never thought of that without all these other people. Not to mention the fun influence I got to have on all of their cities. Um, you know, one of them, poor place, Dur doesn't have any fresh water.
Yeah, thanks to you.
Just yeah, like there was one where it was like, oh, there's no water, or there's a salt something other here, and I was like, cool, I'm gonna add a lake, but also it's not potable. So
Exactly.
just kind of building this. I love that. I thought that was really fun, and it flowed really well. I know you homebrewed it a little bit, but whatever you did, it's working, and it was really fun.
Good. I'm really excited because I mean it's always a bit of a risk when you take a swing like that. You kind of change up the rules,
hmm
especially for the players that have already done it.
hmm
So I think everybody liked it because it's supposed to just focus on the one settlement, but having a chance to focus on everybody's, I think it gives
mm
us like just enough of an idea where people could like grab onto an idea or two, and
hmm
then we kicked it up to 11 by throwing in some curveballs. And I think now at least we'll all have a little bit of a frame of reference to when we actually visit those cities. We can see how I like twist and manipulate what you guys said
hmm
to get
hmm
what I want out of it.
Yeah.
So we've alluded to him already, but let's talk a little bit about Nine. Can you give me just a little short bio of him and maybe where you got a little inspiration?
Sure. So nine. He's an elf. He's a Shadar Kai. I'll admit, part of it is I liked he could teleport once a day. I love to be able to teleport. So that was one of the big things I was looking for. And then I read more about Shadar Kai, and I was like, oh, that's 100% perfect for what I was going for anyway. I wanted to play a soul knife. I thought that was a super cool concept. I like the technical gamify side of that and the aesthetic of it. So I was like, okay, soul knife. I love Eldritch stuff. Let's work with that in there. It's like, okay, I like Mind Flayers. Mind Flayers are Eldritch. How could there be any connection? And I had been watching some. I just happened to watch something about Eldritch horror or whatever, and just the concept of seeing things that drives you mad. I was like, okay. Nine was held captive. His name is Nine because he was branded with a number along with a bunch of other captives, and he was subject number 9. So he was held captive by a group of mind flayers, of Illithid, and he doesn't remember anything before his capture. They destroyed his mind because he and the other subjects are used almost like a filter, so that the mind flayers can look into the void, so to speak, and see this eldritch forbidden knowledge. So think of it as like a pair of sunglasses, and they're looking through him. So it's a little filtered, maybe a little warbled for them, but he's getting this full brunt of whatever this stuff is, and the subjects are basically burned through. He's number 9, and he is now the lowest number. They burnt through 8 humanoids already completely, and basically from what he saw and experienced, that's how he got these abilities. That's why he became Shadar Kai, and that's why his soul knife abilities are going to kind of come to life. Because he ended up escaping. A group of adventurers came in to take out the mind flayers. They got super killed, and he ran, and boom, that's it. That's 9.
That's 9, and that gives me so much to work with that I'm excited for us to get up into that part of the world and see what Tellerant is like, as well as some of the additions you made to the map, which I'm going to talk about in later videos, but adding in maybe an access point to the Underdark, not too far from where we all are. That'll be a nice little segue as well. So that was something that I also wanted to discuss just a little bit of, like, in the quiet year, how you were able to commandeer the game a little bit to make sure some aspects that you wanted were able to get on the map and get onto the table.
Sure.
I kind of spoiled one for you, but do you remember any other ones that you really liked?
Yeah, another really big one was that temple. I wanted to get the concept, because in typical D&D, this concept of the old gods, of Eldritch gods, that's not really a thing. So I wanted to kind of push forward and get in people's heads the concept of there are old gods in this world, or there were, whatever, and, that's a thing. So that's part of why I built that in there. It was a temple to some gods that nobody remembers, and some spooky stuff happens underneath. Some people went in, and they didn't come back. What we said with the, like there's a big cavern that opened up or something like that leads to the Underdark. There's a druid grove. I was like, okay, let's get something that's not spooky, scary skeletons. Cool, druid grove. And then I think right towards the end, I was like, we have 0 undead. That's unacceptable. So like, cool, this whole area is full of undead.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was kind of thinking, from knowing what a DM has to do perspective, and from a what I want to experience perspective, to get a big variety of things to fight and things to do. It's nice to have conniving, sneaky enemies with political aspirations. It's nice to have big, scary monsters that are brutal, and it's nice to have these kind of brainless but terrifyingly unending undead. That's kind of all. And adding those lakes give us some big bodies of water to do stuff with. I know in one of the campaigns we did something fun underwater that got wild. That was exciting.
So we should have a lot of different things to explore, especially if we're going to try to go, level 15 plus. I think there's all sorts of environments that we can explore, different settlements, ruins, some underground stuff potentially, and the gods always have to be thrown in there too. So,
of course,
plenty of stuff to look at.
Definitely.
So in the past campaigns that we've done together, without going too much into like character backstories of anything, but like what was it about like our table that you wanted to do a 5th campaign?
A big part of it, not to boost your ego or anything, but yeah, exactly. I really, really like how you interweave people's backstories. You make, for sure me, and I assume everybody else based on my experience with them, it makes it feel like our characters matter. It's less of like a module where you're like, there's this story happening and you're going to be the heroes, but you only exist in this story. Um, in your campaigns, it's always been like, hey, who are you? Why are you? What are you doing? What's going to happen? Uh, like even in the first campaign when I was playing with you, I didn't know what was coming. Just kind of that I don't know a whole lot. Here's Aster. Here's some small stuff about him, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, this guy is there that you told me about. I was like, oh, okay, you know, uh, that was super exciting. And then working in, when poor Aster died, working in Tace, um, and just how he was just a huge part of the world right away. Your world, you were able to work him in, and another thing that's really fun on a similar kind of note is I can just say something is, and a lot of times you'll either work it in or correct it in an easy way where it's like, well, actually, that's not quite right. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, cool, no problem.
And it never
But,
hurts to ask. It never hurts to
yeah,
say, "Is this good?"
right. But there's a chance, too, where it's like we get this almost natural thing where, oh, Jason didn't say that's not true. Cool. Like, all of a sudden something exists and always has existed, so to speak.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think that collaborativeness is something that I really like as well because I love when you guys give me those like little brain ticklers, like where you'll throw
mhm,
something out there and then it just like immediately grabs my attention and I'm like, yes, I never would have thought of that. It fits in
mhm,
perfectly. Here's how it's going to happen. And especially with like a character death like you had, like your first character
mhm.
you brought to the table, he was only what,
Yeah,
like 4 or 5 sessions in.
yeah,
Um, and you handled it really well. Like you were disappointed, obviously, but then you were able to bring in this new character that we were able to like sit together and kind of talk about. Okay,
that was super
so
exciting.
he's coming from like
Yeah,
the inside of this city. He's going to have knowledge of the inner circle. You're going to have some information to bring like to the party,
mhm,
and that can be a great way to just like immediately, facilitate them relying on you and you kind of relying on them because you had your own interests
mhm.
as well.
Yeah, that was super fun. Um, I like to your combat is tough, but in a good way, I think. Um, Characters die. Aster's a great example. Um, you know, and even less absurd things where characters will die, where it's like, yeah, the monster was just too tough. You guys tried to fight it, and you rolled poorly, and you died, and you can't afford to revive them.
And
um,
that's where they were laid to rest, right there, unfortunately.
yep, yeah, and it's cool. It's the monsters aren't dumb. The enemies know how to preserve their own lives for the most part.
And
Um,
we've talked about that before, just you and I after a session, and maybe
mhm,
even like early on in the beginning, that if character death is like not an option, as much as we love our characters, if it's not an option, it almost like cheapens the experience of the game,
oh, yeah,
at least
absolutely.
like based on what you're looking for out of the game. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like if it's not dangerous, if you just have plot armor and you can just run around and do whatever, like that's why I've never had like a murder hobo situation on my hands.
Hmm.
Because if you
Hmm.
guys run up against the city guard and you know that they're powerful and you guys aren't quite
You're
there yet,
toast.
it's gonna make your life hard. Now that being said, I don't think I'm like a I can be flexible. Like I want you guys to have fun
Oh
and like
yeah,
do some kooky stuff, but I think there's a good like healthy amount of respect at our table as well that kind of facilitates those moments too.
yeah. That danger was a big part of what made Tace who he was. His whole thing. He didn't want to die. So both narratively he didn't want to die, and at the table I could role play of like, I know Will let us die if we make bad decisions and have bad luck. He's gonna let us die. So that was a very fun way to work that into role play as well.
Absolutely. The one of the final things I have to ask you, and then you can maybe ask me something, or we can go in any direction you want. But let's talk about what you said that your like problem player characteristic was. Did you?
Oh, you wouldn't? I wanted to check more than one.
I know, but what was the one that ended up on top for you? Was it boss critic,
I think
or
I
was
think
it?
it was. I think it was the one where it was like we're gonna do it my way, um, which I struggle with, because I get really excited and I want to see. I want to see the result of something. I want to see what the next chapter is in this particular book, but there's a million books for us to look at, and everybody else has equal say. Um, Combined with sometimes people don't want to make a plan and go forward and do a thing, because that's tough. It's less exciting to sit there and be like, all right, what about the ifs ands? Um, so I think a big part of it is I get excited and I want to go, I want to do it. I just got to remember I'm not the main character. I get really excited. I want to see what happens to my character. It's less of a pride like I'm most important and more of I'm a little selfish in that I want to see what you have come up with for my character. So I get overexcited and I forget that there are 5 or 6 other people potentially who are equally as invested in their characters and whatever they're interested in.
And I'll say that can be a problem player at a table. Like if someone is trying to direct all the attention and you're just like
Mm-hmm.
steamrolling people and like there's rolling over, they just go all quiet. But I think that you also do a pretty good job of like checking yourself. Or if I'm like, oh, like, are you guys okay with that? Do you want to do it? And other people voice their opinions. Like you're also
Mm-hmm.
quick to say, oh yeah, that's fine. Let's do that. Or
Yeah.
like, let's talk about it and see where we want to go from there. And I think that's part of a healthy table too, like
Yeah.
to be able to take that criticism or just to back off or say, well, we're here now, let's do this because it's what I wanted to do, and then like absolutely, let's go follow that thread as well.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. I think a big part of it is it's something that I think runs in the family where if I'm selfish, it's not because I'm doing it on purpose. I genuinely don't realize. So being able to have you or someone be like, well, what about them? Immediately kicks me back and it's like, okay, hey, I I don't want to be that guy. So I'm able to kind of silence myself a little bit, not even silence, but pull myself back a little bit and be like, oh, let's see what else happens. Everybody else has great ideas. I want to hear them.
And I would say to be that excited puppy, like thrown out into the world, is
Yeah.
I'd much rather you be that than to have someone that's just like sitting at the table in silence, just like I'm just here for the ride. Like let's just do
Yeah.
whatever. Sometimes it's nice to have like one player that is like, let's do this. Like let's be actionable. Let's do that. Even
Hmm.
if it's not the best idea, it's the best that we have. Let's just go because plans are going to fall apart anyway. So let's not spend three
Right.
hours. Let's spend 30 minutes and then let's get into it.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah, and if I say let's go do this, that gives somebody else the perfect opportunity to rebut, and at least we're moving now. We're making a decision.
Yes.
I think it's just important that I let other people make those rebuttals and listen to them, um, which I think I've gotten in my own head anyway. I feel like I've accepted that easier and better over time because it's a learning thing. I've never really played D&D before I played in the first game with you, so it was it's a learning process to learn how you properly interact with everybody at a table in this type of game. It's a very unique storytelling game.
100%. And you're someone that's coming from like a very heavy like video game sort of background,
Yeah.
like PC
Hmm.
and console. So you're used to just like let's just make a decision and go with it and see what happens. So when you have to rely
Hmm.
on other people, but like that's what makes D&D and other TTRPGs so
Hmm.
much fun. It's just like, oh, we could do anything and we can do what someone
Right.
else wants to say, and that's great.
Right. Yeah, that's a big thing. Is like it's not a video game. I gotta remember, I'm not gonna go talk to every single NPC, get every quest from everybody with an exclamation point over their head. I'm gonna miss the secret treasure sometimes and not be able to go back, and that's okay. Especially because if it was a really cool thing that you want us to have, you'll bring it back, and we'll never know we missed it. Like
Exactly.
it's one of those things I gotta remind myself. It's like you're not a computer.
Yes. Did you just peek behind the DM curtain? How do you know that? How do you know?
I have DM'd enough times to where, especially with certain players that you and I both know, where they'll miss some very obvious context clues, and it's like, man, there's something really cool I want you guys to experience here. Or I had a really cool fight, and and more of a good side of it is I had a really cool fight, a really cool encounter in mind, and my players came up with a really cool way to just avoid it. Not just, oh, we're not going to go, but hey, let's do these crazy things, use our items and our abilities and our brains to not have to deal with it. It's like, cool, you did it. And
Tip
I
your
can bring
hat to
in
the
that cool.
players and say congratulations, you found you solved my puzzle and we're
Exactly.
moving on.
And I bring it back later and they never know that I'm reusing it.
Exactly.
uh, yeah. Oh, come on, buddy.
Do you have any questions for me as a DM or anything about the quiet year that you wanted to ask?
I guess I'd be curious what, as far as the quiet year goes, it sounds like one of the bigger changes was it was meant for one settlement, so to speak. Other than that, did you make any kind of significant changes to how it works?
Yeah, I added in the one feature where you can steal a second question that another player
Mm,
had because I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to have a little bit more say in your own settlement.
mm-hmm.
So I thought that was a good, like, fair addition because it's kind of a bummer when you're like, well, I kind of have some ideas about my place too.
Right,
And I think you
right.
did a good job of finding yours and grabbing it to make sure that you
Mm-hmm.
got one in so you could do something on
Right.
your side. Um, Other than that, I mean, I changed some of the questions. I changed everything from like community because it's supposed to be about like the
Mm-hmm.
one community to pick a settlement,
Mm-hmm.
just to better tailor it for what we were trying to do. But the first campaign we did here was we did do a settlement that was separated from everything else. So we played the game just basically out of the box, off the page. The second
Mm-hmm.
one, we tailored it towards like a specific kingdom that we were returning to. So then this one, it
Mm-hmm.
was like, let's try something different so the other players get a chance to experience it too.
Cool. I mean, I'll say I wouldn't have guessed. See, it seems like it worked pretty dang well, and it
Mm-hmm.
it could just be our group. It worked really well with. The other guys are. I mean, they're creative. They have great ideas and stuff too, which excites me to see. To have a different group of players, honestly, like I love everybody we played with. I miss playing with them, but it is also very exciting to be able to play with different people, especially after what 5 years, longer. Yeah, just all of a sudden be like, oh wow, like there there's not always gonna be a this type of player,
Mm-hmm.
or hey, this other type of player does exist. Um, yeah, it's really cool. It's really
Yep, and
exciting.
there's a lot of positives and negatives that come with that, just as you learn other
Hmm.
people's play style. And like some of these players that we have now are ones that like I've created. Like I was
Hmm.
their first DM as well, so that's kind of fun to train new people. And other
Oh yeah.
people have played at other tables, and they're like, "Oh, that's not how I did it over there, but I like this better." So
Hmm.
that's also
Hmm.
good.
I love the rules. Rules are there for a reason, and I like to reference them. But it's also important to be like, oh, you don't want to. That's fine. You don't want to do that. That's fine. Here's what it says, and then you go, no, that's not how I'm going to do it. Cool.
And
That's awesome. No,
like,
no
what
worries.
percent of the time would you say that I'm breaking in favor of the character's decision?
Oh, and the characters? If you
Yes.
break it, it's like 90% of the time it's for the sake of the characters.
Yes. Okay.
You
Good.
know, and if it's for the sake of the monster, it's not even because you want to make it stronger. It's because it's like, oh, this would cheapen the experience. If it's like, if half the party is immune to this monster's attack because of some niche rule, oh, that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
That's not very fun. Um,
And
yeah.
playing like monsters straight off of the manual, like we've all played enough, D and
Hmm.
D that like we know the stat blocks kind of, or what they're
Hmm.
resistant to or whatever. So just making a couple tweaks to that is enough. Where like
Yeah.
as a player, you're like, wait a second,
Hmm.
okay, I don't know what I'm dealing with, and I need to be careful because I don't know what's coming.
I think the
So
biggest thing when I did Mad Mage with you guys, uh, for Ty, I had my monster have more than one reaction. So somebody else moved and got hit, and then the other player was like, "Sweet, now I can run away." It's like, no, this guy's fast. he can do it more than once, uh, which is very exciting, but also very stressful for the players because I run very brutal, especially in Mad Mage,
mhm.
very brutal combat.
And that takes some
Anyway.
adaptation too, like as a player, like you got to respond to
Hmm.
that. But that's also a neat little wrinkle because like reactive is a feature that monsters can have in
Hmm.
5e. So it's not like you just pulled that out of nowhere. You just gave it to a
Yeah.
monster that didn't have it. But then that changes up, yeah, like your whole positioning. It can
Oh,
dramatically change a
100%. When all
battle.
of a sudden it's like, oh, uh, I think the TPK was not because of that. So at least at least it wasn't a rule of mine.
Exactly.
Uh,
Oh, that's
but
great.
yeah, I think it's really fun to have. I have enough knowledge of behind the curtain to be dangerous, and to be able. I feel like I can appreciate a lot of the cool things that you're doing, and that's fun for me to be like, oh man, like I know that did. He went above and beyond in this scenario to make something interesting and unique, because I know what the out of the box version is. Um,
Well, thank
so
you for
that's
saying
super
that
fun.
because like my whole goal of doing this is to try to get, other people to DM games because I think it just gives
Yeah.
you an even deeper appreciation for the games that we're running. And like maybe you catch the bug and you want to be a DM forever, like I've
Hmm.
been, or maybe just like, that was great, I learned a lot, but now I can be an even better player because I've seen what's on the other side of the screen. Thanks for watching, and remember, why be a player when you can be a god?